Welcome to the Tarot Tapestry, a weaving of self-discovery, where three tarot mavens put their heads and hearts together to offer their wisdom and insights about the tarot. We hope that you find this helpful in your personal journey to self-discovery and growth.
Join us as we explore ways to use tarot for self-reflection and self-correction.
Together, we'll discover new ways to use tarot to weave threads of understanding into the tapestry of your life. Welcome back to another episode of Tarot Tapestry. We are the Tarot Mavens, and today we will be talking about temperance, and Linda will be leading us off.
Thank you, Kate. I've been doing a lot of reading and studying kind of in preparation for this, and kind of have come to a little bit of a different viewpoint on this card than I had before. I guess before I just kind of thought about it as temperance being doing things in moderation and nothing to excess and that sort of thing. And kind of on the surface, when you look at it, that's true, I guess. But when I was looking through Rachel Pollack's book, The 78 Degrees of Wisdom, she talks about the Major Arcana. She takes the Fool out, so she has 21, uses the 21 cards because the Fool is the journeyer through those cards, and she has them lined up in rows of 7. So the first line, she talks about the first line, which is 1, the Magician through the Chariot. That's kind of like when you're a young person and you're just kind of setting out in life and you're figuring just kind of the surface things out. And then you go to the second line, which would start with strength, I guess. And then you get to the end of that, and the Temperance is the last card in that line, and it's under the Chariot. And just going from the roots of the word temperance, which is she talks about it being the Latin temperare or temperar, and it's to mix. And so I started thinking about it, and it's like how you mix your inner and outer beings. And I sort of thought about it as tempering. If you've ever watched any cooking shows or the Great British Bake Off, they talk about tempering chocolate. Like if you're making candy, you can't just melt chocolate and make candy out of it. You have to do it a certain way. You have to temper it. And the same thing is if you are making a sauce that has eggs in it, you can't just put an egg in a hot thing because you'll just get scrambled eggs. So you have to take a little bit of the warm liquid and put it in the egg and mix it up slowly so that it becomes a sauce or an emulsion, and you get a sauce versus, a bowl of scrambled eggs that you don't want. So that got me thinking about how it's sort of a mixing of the things, the challenges that you have in life, your inner challenges, and how you have to sort of calm those challenges down so that you can face or integrate them. And my Zen deck, of course, my favorite, that card is called integration. So you have to take the inner things that you are dealing with and integrate them so that you can face the challenges that come from outside of yourself. Because if you're kind of at war with the things going on inside, and you're always blaming, you're always blaming somebody else for something that you need to put your attention on. They made me do this, or that's because they don't listen to me, or they don't do this, or they don't do that. But you need to do that inner work so that when you blend all that together, then you are an integrated person. And then you go into the third line of the Major Arcana, and that's more of the spiritual, going like if you were going up the chakras to the crown. So that's kind of how I've been looking at this card now. It's totally different than what I had thought about it when I first, earlier this week when I started just looking at it like, oh, well, it's just being moderate, and you're not overbalanced, and you're not excessively one way or the other, because then you think of the temperance society where, the women were like, oh, well, we're against drinking. So you think prohibition and we're not going to go out and get drunk and get rowdy and whatever. But when you get into it and you look at how deep it really is, there's a lot there.
I agree with everything you said. I also like I've always seen that visual of the angel with the stream going between the two cups, of seeing that as like an area of flow where
Mhm.
you just sort of have to trust that things are going to blend the way you want to, and then the angel kind of represents your, your planning self, your higher self, your smart self, just
Yeah, and
keeping an eye that
she talks
um
about that in the image, about how when you look at the image in the Rider Waite and the angel has the cup, she's not pouring directly above the cup. It's almost the liquid is going at an angle,
mhm,
which you couldn't normally, you couldn't do that. But if you were sort of moving the cups in a almost like a figure eight, again, the
yeah,
infinity thing, and then you pour it, it would appear to come out at an angle like that, because you're in a state of flow and you're not
mhm.
just statically standing and pouring from above to below. You are moving and flowing and doing it that way.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say about this card is it does in the imagery sort of remind me of the Two of Pentacles, where the person is balancing two pentacles. They're not related numerologically or anything. That's just what the imagery says to me. And so this is more of like a balancing, like you were saying, of your inner temp temperatures, pretty much how everything is going to work together, because we're not like stacks of Legos. We're more like watercolors, right? If you're talking about the chakras, everything that
Right.
balances on everything else. And if you've got, you know, low energy here, then there's going to be extra energy, or something's going to go goofy off in the other direction. So it's sort of those two cards always go together in my head. I don't know if that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense
thought
to
about,
anybody
I
else,
actually thought
but
about the Two of Pentacles as well, with the
yeah.
juggling in that figure eight. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like what both of you are saying. And, today when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, I'm like, you know what? Let's try to keep it really, really simple. I feel sometimes like I go too deep into something and I'm like, I'm going to try something different today. And I really want to try to like keep it very um like not down to earth, but very like practical. So to look at temperance in a very practical way for myself, to think about bringing what temperance means into my everyday living, and what might that look like. So I was thinking about temperance, like invites us, and you guys mentioned these words already, but invites us to think about where we may need to integrate or reintegrate some balance or moderation in our life, right? Sometimes the reintegration is just more about we've had it before in our life, and then life got really crazy and we just kind of got a little out of balance, and we need to look at that and say, how can I reintegrate that balance or moderation again into my life? And then we may have struggled with things for a very, very long time, and we never really learn how to integrate balance into our life. And that might be something that you're looking to do. And then I started to think about, well, if I wanted to put it into a very simple question, and nothing is really simple when you come to tarot and self-growth, but I started to think about, like, how do I handle or manage my life in a way that doesn't leave me feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, or anxious, right? Because if we think of those are three words that we often feel a lot when we are out of balance, right? When things are not working in a way that is going to enable us to be in that place of calm. And Linda, you mentioned that word before, right? This place of just being calm and being patient and having clarity, right? Those could be like the three things that you that you might want to look for as the end result of working on balancing the stress that we have in life, right? Just balancing the everyday shit that goes on that
Well, and
stresses us out,
the other thing that she talks about is that, I guess, part of the thing is, because of the way that we live in our society, is that, if a situation arises and you're trying to fix it, or you're trying to figure out what to do, or whatever, that we immediately jump to some kind of action. And in here she is saying sometimes the best thing to do is nothing, and to just come to the center and be still, and it's particularly if it's involving other people, because we all know that we can't control other people. And sometimes the best thing to do in those situations is just to say, okay, I'm here, I can be a friend, I can support you, whatever, but not really do anything, because there really isn't anything that you can do. You cannot fix another person's situation or another person's whatever. And so you have to just be able to kind of pull back a little bit and say, I'll be here, a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on, whatever it is, but I can't do anything, and just be okay with that. And that's really hard for us in our society and our social milieu that we live in, because we are so action oriented. We have to fix it. We have to jump in. We have to help. We have to, build back the wall after the hurricane, or whatever it is. But in some cases, the best thing to do is just nothing, because then you don't do anything for a little while and just kind of give it some peace, and miraculously you get a phone call. It's like, oh yeah, that all resolved. It all took care of itself. It all happened. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, and that reminded me of like how you often hear how just women are like they want to help, and they want to fix things. Like you can see like a very stereotypical relationship might be, a woman being with a partner, right? Or just a woman and a man, or two partners together, and one feels like they need to like fix this person and help this person and do all of that. And when you think about that, it's like exactly what you're saying, Linda. You can't control what people do. You can offer your help. You can
Mhm.
say, I'm here for you if you need me. But you, at some point, you have to learn to stop taking the action of trying to do something, and just sit back and rest and say, okay, I am not going to do anymore. Because how much stress, and I am a perfect example of that. I was that person, and to some extent, I think I still am. That's like one of those lifelong things that I'm learning to integrate balance with, right? Is just that I'm learning to step back and not take the action, because it freaking stresses me out beyond belief. So
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
could be a perfect example of an area of my life where I'm very stressed out, and looking at that and saying, okay, well, why am I stressed out? What's out of balance here? What am I not um what am I doing that's making me so stressed out? And maybe
Yeah.
I should stop doing it and maybe
Well,
do
I
something a little
kind of
different.
learned that when my daughter, of course, she was a teenage mom, and that obviously required help, because she didn't have the education and the skills and everything to get a really good job that you kind of need when you have kids. And so there was a lot of help going on there. But as she got older, and as we sort of separated from the everyday, because she lived with me for a while when that was going on, um, I had to teach myself, because she had this habit of calling me up and going into this litany of everything, how bad everything was, but she never asked me for anything. She would just, and then I would jump and say, oh, well, do you, let me do this, let me do that. So she never said, I need X number of dollars, she would say, oh, we're going to get evicted, or oh, this is going on. And I would then jump in to fill that gap. And so as time went on, as she got older and had better jobs and et cetera, she would call and still vent, people vent to your mom, whatever. And I would just say, wow, I started to teach myself, wow, that sounds really challenging. How are you going to handle that? And what are you going to do about that? And then when the boys, my grandsons, came up and they were having probably, and I would they call me about something. I'd say, you know what? You have a really good head on your shoulders. You're going to figure out how to handle this. You're going to do this. You're going to figure out how to do this. And of course, sometimes you send a little money or whatever, but in the great majority of things, it's like, that's really tough. I could give him a little bit of advice. I'd say, well, if that were me, I might do this. But more, it was like questions. I'm like, how do you think you're going to figure that out? Have you thought about this or that? And then I would hang up and go, let go with my fingernails. I'd have marks at the desk from not,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not jumping in. But it's something that you really have to train yourself to do. But it definitely, like you say, Kate, when you learn how to do it, it does really lower your stress level.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we can all relate to that,
Absolutely. So as I know, Angie, did you want to say something? I
No,
don't
I'm
want to
good.
no, okay.
Sorry.
So one thing that I was thinking, so I bought my first Toth deck. And
Ooh.
yeah, and I am really excited about it. I had thought about it, a few years ago, and I don't think I was quite ready to handle it because it's pretty intense. Um, so I'm taking it really slow. And one of the things that I did was I started to look at, well, how does the Toth, what does it say about temperance? And I'm not really going to go because there's still a lot of things that I don't understand. But one of the things that I read in there that really resonated with me was talking about temperance and moderation. And I'm trying to find exactly where I put it down. Um, is that when we are in balance, right? That balance comes from a place of stability and strength inside of you. And I thought about that, Linda, when you were talking about how our what we what what we are on the inside and how we bring that out into the world. Um, that really, so if you think about shining your light out into the world, if you think about reaching or that journey towards your authentic self or your true self and how you really want to live your life according to what your values are, um, you need to be at peace on the inside. That's how I look at stability, where I'm at peace on the inside, and that it takes strength, right? It takes a lot of inner strength to come to peace and to come to terms with things that I may need to change about myself, right? That takes a lot of strength to be able to do that. And life is really all about dealing with the changes that occur and how do we handle those changes, and like adapting. That was like another word that I read when I was studying this card in the thought is adapting, right? How well do I adapt, or how well do I not adapt to the changes that are going on around me? And when we take the time to examine how we adapt to change, because life is always changing, things are always going on, um, that being able to take the time to go within and examine that, that's strength, right? That's like, that takes a lot. It takes a lot of courage for somebody to be able to do that, and then to be very truthful with yourself about what may need to change, and then when you do that, and when you develop this pattern or this habit of working on yourself, that's when internally and externally things just become more stable, right? You're
Yeah.
you're not so rocky and wavy,
Yeah. The other
anymore.
thing
And
that
that
she
and
talked about with that is that sort of like the balance of inner knowledge, having the inner knowledge of yourself with spontaneity, or the things that happen in life that you don't have any control over. Because when you are able to integrate the things that your inner challenges that you face, whether it's, a rocky childhood, or the things that we all have to deal with from our past, whatever that might be, um, the more you can, kind of admit that these things affect you going forward, and that they color some of the things that how you react to things, or how you approach things in your life. Um, it's like when you can integrate those and understand why you might react to a certain thing from outside because it was a trigger from back in your childhood, etc. Then you can be very, you can be who you are. You can be the same person with everybody. It's like a lot of people are compartmentalized. They have to be a certain way at work. They have to be a certain way at home. They have to be a certain way with some friends, a certain way with other friends. And if you have integrated that, you are just, it's like, I look at it like telling the truth. When you tell the truth all the time, you don't have to worry about what you said. You
You
don't
have to have a
have to,
very
you
good
don't have to
memory.
keep up with your lies. You don't have to keep up
Yeah.
with your stories. And somebody says, well, you said so and so. And you're like, yeah, I did. I said that. And what? It's like nobody can hold things against you. When you have integrated those things, and you're never done. There's
No,
always something to work on.
it just
But
keeps
if you've
coming.
worked on it and become, like you said, Kate, more comfortable with those things, then things can pop up in your life and you can just deal with them. You don't have to go off into angst and worry and whirling and whatever. You can just say, oh, well, here's something I got to deal with. And so let me just take care of
I
it
think
and move on.
temperance asks you, like you said, what are you going to do about it? And numerologically, it's related to the fives of the deck, and the fives in the deck usually show some sort of a conflict, like the
Yeah.
wands. Everybody's kind of swinging their wands around, doesn't look super organized. So that kind of asks you, how are you going to deal with it when you're frustrated, when you feel passionate about something and you're hitting opposition or different opinions or competing interests. And the cups, five of cups, yeah, okay, your heart's broken, but it's also, you got to move on. So how are you going to do that? How do you deal with grief? How do you
Mm-hmm.
learn to live with it? And the swords, how do you deal with conflict? Are you a sore loser? Are you a sore winner? Like, are you a me with your words just
Right.
because you know how to? And in the five of pentacles, people are on hard times. It looks like they need some help. Like, how do you deal when you are the one who needs a hand up? How do you treat people who are the ones that need a hand up? And like, what are you going to do about it? And that's what the Temperance Major Arcana card I think asks of us. How are you going to use all of this and your amazing brain and higher self and knowledge and wisdom about the world? And you're going to look at this scenario, this situation honestly. What are you going to do about it? And like you said,
Yeah, and
Linda, sometimes there's nothing.
what you
Yeah.
just said is perfect, because it's an integration of, like, almost like mind, body, spirit. Because if you're
Mhm.
always in your head, you're going to react different. You're going to, you're always going to be a certain way. If you're always reacting from your heart and just giving, and just, you're going to deplete yourself. And you have to integrate all of those ways of reacting to situations so that you can make the best decisions and help people. If you want to help them the best way that you can, without depleting
Ruining your own
yourself,
life.
or doing something for somebody that is just taking away their autonomy,
Yeah.
because a lot of times you're helping, or I don't want to say interfering, because that seems, that seems like the gossipy, the nosy
If you
neighbor kind of
always
thing.
swoop in and
But if
save
you're
someone,
always,
they never learn
yeah, if
how to
you're
save
always
themselves.
keeping somebody from falling down, they
Mhm.
don't learn how to get back up on their own.
Yeah, they don't learn that a skinned knee is not the end of the world
Yeah.
if they've never had to
Yeah,
hear the word
absolutely.
no or
Yeah.
fail and then figure a way out themselves. Like that's what you teach your kids to do, right?
Right.
Because that's life, right? You have to learn to figure shit out.
Yep.
Right.
And sometimes you don't have somebody to rely on to help you figure it out. And you need to develop those skills that
Well, and
enable you to do it
that's the part
yourself.
where you have to integrate that, where I mean, I think a big part of it is where you have to take responsibility for your own part in situations. Like, okay, maybe something happened when I was 5 years old that I didn't have any control over. You're 5 years old, you don't have any control over stuff. And it's really terrible when things happen, bad things happen to you as a young child that you don't understand and don't. But when you're, 30, you can't keep using that as an excuse. That's when you say,
Yeah.
okay, this thing happened when I was 5. Now, why is it affecting me now that I'm 30? I should be
What am
able
I going to
to,
do about it?
yeah, what am I
Yeah.
going to do about that?
Mhm.
Just like I had mentioned, oh gosh, a few episodes ago, I think Eli's aunt and uncle had this banter, and I realized that it sort of gave me a PTSD flashback to my jealous husband. And once
Mm.
I realized that, I was like, oh, that's why I'm uncomfortable when they do
Yeah.
that. It didn't have anything to do with what they were doing. I
And
didn't say
sometimes
to
when you
them,
figure
and I
that
didn't
out,
say to
then
them, you can't have your banter.
and sometimes
I
when you're brave
had,
enough to figure that out,
yeah,
it never bothers you again. You go,
and
oh,
now I'm fine.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just
That's
like,
why,
whoa, imagine that. I looked at myself and figured out what was
yeah,
going on, and I decided to do something about it internally.
yeah. That's why it's important to be brave and to pay attention to where you've got friction in your life. And
Yeah.
it's not that you're always responsible, but there is a part that you play in it because you are there. Like, what is your part?
Yeah,
With no judgment, just
especially as you
figure
get
out
older.
what it is.
Yeah.
And if you can do something about it, then do it. And if you can't, then there's got to be other options or,
Then you can ask for help, but you have to
yeah,
be brave enough and mature enough to ask for that help.
yes,
And then when somebody offers it to you
to
and maybe
take
it
it.
makes you uncomfortable, stick
Yeah.
with it. You got to stick with it.
Yep. Yep. Indeed. I feel like I had another really smart thing to say, but now I don't remember what it was. I'll remember as soon as
Sorry.
we're done.
I have really been blabbing
I
on this
love those
episode, and I'm
moments.
sorry if I talked over y'all. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're very passionate, Linda. You're very passionate about what you wanted to, share with our listeners. So the other thing that I got from studying this Thoth card um, was in this particular place that I went to read about it. They talked about, obviously, in Thoth, the Temperance card is called art, right? And it refers to the art of alchemy. Um, and the figure is like uh, two, it's okay. How he refers to it is it's a fusion of the Empress and the Emperor, right? And they also refer to it, which I really loved this, was a fusion of the subconscious, the moon, energies with the conscious sun, and this idea of that masculine principle and the feminine principle, and having this balance of both, incorporating both into our life. And it reminded me of when we recorded the Queen's episode and the King's episode of the court cards, and how, this idea of all of us, right? We have all of those personalities inside of us, right? We have the pages and the knights and the king and the queen, and all of that together makes up this whole person. But when you think about the king and the queen, um, they kind of represent a little bit more, I guess, in detail or depth. a masculine energy and a feminine energy, and then how we can integrate those energies together in order to have balance. And I really like that. I know that's like very broad. um you know um it's a very broad thing to think about, masculine energy, feminine energy, and bringing it together. But I really loved how he also brought in the idea of the moon and the sun. And I think that is also representative in the picture itself. So I don't really want to talk much about, unless you guys know more about that. But these were just like little bits and pieces that I was learning, that I was just like, wow, like um, I really like that, and then in the picture too, it's like the figure has the colors of each other incorporated into the other one, which
Mhm.
was also this idea of dualities, and how these dualities, merge together. Um, yeah, so I'm going to stop there because it's like, ooh, there's just like so much, and
Yeah,
I
I
get so
have that
excited
deck.
thinking about it.
I do have a copy of the deck, and I think it's beautiful, but it is like really
Yeah.
um intense.
It
And
is, it's very intense, but what I love about it is after I work with it for a while, I get so many new and different insights into the Rider Waite deck. And I just love the names that the thought deck gives to the cards, each
mhm,
card,
Yeah.
because it just like was like, whoa, I hadn't thought of it that way. Just the
yeah.
key word that they have on the card, it's like, wow, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I
And
like how they can kind of other decks can make you a better reader of other decks. You know what I mean?
yes, yes.
I've been working this year almost exclusively with my Spirit Keepers tarot deck, which is just it's so amazing. It's so deep. But that's why I haven't. And I'm not. I know there are a lot of people who work with lots of different decks and switch decks every month, and I am just. And it's not just tarot decks. It's like relationships. Like I find one I like, and I'm done for a while.
Well,
You
I
know?
worked with my Zen deck for 30 years
Yeah.
and I loved it. And I still go back. In fact, I went back to it last night for a friend and I still go back to it. But after spending so much time with it, and we talked a little bit about that in the Queen's episode because the one particular card had really colored my feeling about that Queen card, and getting out of that and going to other decks, it helped me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of am the same way. I have decks that I really like, and I've been in when I do my 1 day a week at the metaphysical store. I've been I started switching them up because I had three that I've been working with for like almost 2 years, and I thought, hey, maybe you need to switch this up a little bit
Yeah.
to just see
Yeah.
how it goes.
I will.
Yeah.
I have other decks. I don't have a lot. I gave a lot of them away at the beginning of the year because they were just gorgeous decks and they were just sitting on my shelf. They were not getting used, and I just felt like sad about that. So I gave most of them away, and I donated a few to the local like bookstore. I can't remember what it's called. Sorry, I'll look it up. But like I said, I'll go to other decks once in a while for a day or two, but I always just come back to the Spirit Keepers Tarot. I pulled one every day so far this year.
Well,
Which
one of these days I'm going to find that deck that doesn't cost an arm and a leg somewhere, and I'm
that'll
going to
teach you.
get it.
Next time she
I
does
know,
pre-orders, get on
I
it.
know.
Thing I was thinking about, Angie, as you were talking about your deck, because that Spirit Keeper deck is like very, like you said, it's very intense and it's a wealth of information. And you think
I
about
love it so much. It is my favorite deck that I have ever had.
and you think about like levels of tarot, right? So, each um I don't want to say method, but and not style of tarot, but structure, like not structure. I'm thinking of all the wrong words. But
Every
you have
deck,
like the
every
Rider Waite, right?
mhm.
And then you have the Thoth deck, and then you have the Spirit Keeper, right? Because they're all the same, but yet they're all very different, and they all add more to the meaning of each of the cards. They add more to how you can interpret the card and how you can incorporate those cards into your life. And I kind of look at it for myself as like a progression. You
Mhm.
start someplace more simple, at least for me, you know, in my tarot knowledge. And then you just slowly start to build on that. And then different decks allow you to kind of build on your knowledge and your perspective and how you see it. And it opens up, it just opens up more for you to see about the cards. And I think sometimes if you do too much of it at one time, which is what I tried to do in the very beginning, I
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
very lost, you know, and I got
Yeah.
very like, I can't do this. So I had to like slow my roll. And
Yeah. And
now
it
I
depends
think I'm
on
ready.
it
And
depends
I
on
came back
authors
to it
too, because some
as a
author
grown up.
like Rachel, like I started off with Mary K. Greer, and Mary K. Greer is wonderful. I mean, she is like, I would say to anybody who wants to get started in tarot and doesn't really know anything about it, Tarot for Yourself is like the best book to start with. All kinds of different exercises and things to do, and good meanings and numerology correspondences and stuff like that. But then when I started reading more books, and then now Rachel Pollack, I mean, it's so detailed because I never really worked with the basic Rider Waite, because I got a Native American deck that I had for a while that I never really connected to because the suits were weird names and I just didn't care for it, even though I had it for a long time. And then I got the Zen deck, which is quite different. I mean, it's the same structure, but different names, and it has like almost like the Thoth deck with the keywords and the art and everything. And now that I have come back to this basic Rider Waite deck that belonged to my friend who passed away, and I know that she had it because the cards are, they shuffle, and you know, I just feel like I'm way more connected to it than I ever was.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of cool for me,
And
because
I
now
like
I see
what I
imagery
love
in it that I didn't
about
before.
studying tarot and studying different systems, adding in, you know, when you're studying tarot, when you're learning it, you never learn like you were wrong about that card. You always just sort of deepen and broaden your wisdom and knowledge about the themes of the card, and it makes
Yeah.
you a better reader of any card system. And like I think I've mentioned before that yoga is how I talk to the universe, and tarot is how it talks back to me, is how I feel that whole cycle sort of works. And I've never, like I've never learned more about a deck and ever had like a a source I trust say your interpretation of that card was wrong and here's the right one. You know, when
Yeah.
you study with an open mind and like um a some sort of concept of how things are always connected, even if you don't understand how, it just makes more and more
Yeah, it's
sense.
like, well,
And
here's another layer, here's another facet, here's
yes,
another thing. And yes, what you thought before is still valid, but now it's softened a little bit, or it's just turned a little bit. And sometimes, depending on what questions you ask or who you're reading for, that feeling is still there and it can come forward, but it's not the only thing that the card means, you
yeah,
know. So
yeah.
you just get so
And
much
the
more.
Spirit Keeper's tarot that I'm gushing about is a she kind of syncretized the meanings from the RWS and it's just I learn so much every time I pull a card from this deck, and I'm working through the book of readings that comes with, and you know, when I first got it, I was like, I have to do it all in, you know, 20 weeks or whatever it is. Other than that, I'm taking time.
No, that's a lifetime thing.
Yeah,
That's a
so
lifetime thing.
that's what I mean though. A lot of people don't like to take their time. I more time and I learn from experience. The more I go, the more I learn. I've read these books, I've studied these decks already, but I did them like the hungry caterpillar. I didn't take time to integrate any of it. I just like
There you go.
consumed it. So,
Consumed
you
it,
know,
right?
temperance is something where you're learning, you're changing maybe a little at a time, and not no, there's temperance kind of says there's not really a snap your fingers kind of fix for most things. It's going to take a
Yeah.
little bit of time, and you need to direct your intention, attention, and focus. Um, and like it also says, like you can do it. You can do this. You can. it's scary and you have to be like careful and pay attention, but you can do it.
You're just
You've
not
got
going
it.
to be done with it tomorrow.
Exactly. It's not going
Yeah.
to be over right
Yeah.
in 5 minutes,
Right.
but so I think that's all I've got on temperance for today.
I think that was a lot. I think we gave our readers a lot to think about with the card,
Listeners.
our listeners. Oh Lordy, I'm back to readers again. Our listeners, thank you, Linda, for correcting me. And I know in the beginning we were talking about before we started recording about a spread or pulling some cards, and I've been sitting here trying to think, and I can't really come up with anything. I think I don't know about you guys. I think this is the first time on this episode that we haven't pulled cards
Well, I think it's
for
kind of a personal, like temperance is a very personal thing. So maybe we're all just a little shy. We could pull a card and say, this card to me says this is the area of life that you maybe need a little more balance in. But I'm happy to do
like
that.
that
But
idea. Like
okay.
that
Yeah.
idea because it's
Yeah.
pretty yeah, it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, yeah, I like that idea. So let's do that.
All
Let me
right.
find my deck. Where do my
Yeah,
deck
because
go?
I think the card itself, kind of points to inner work, or just how you deal with a situation, or if there's a situation that you need
Yeah.
to,
You
maybe.
could just maybe pick a card and say, let's see.
And I
Because
got to tell
temperance tells
you,
you that you need to balance. It doesn't tell you what you need to balance. So
right.
I pulled the King of Wands. So
Hmm.
that balanced with temperance, I would say maybe you need to balance your outward drive and your going for things with a little more uh not responsibility. Yeah, to find where you can bring your need to shine your light, which everybody gets to do that, and that's a beautiful thing, I think. And your need to maybe be not really conservative, but so if you don't take care of your day-to-day life, uh, you're not going to be able to shine your light anymore. So, you know, and sometimes the things you have to do to be able to shine your light are a little bit boring or tedious or, um, you know, hard, but they support the rest of your. So I would say that's what you could temperance and the King of Wands together would work, how they would work.
All right, I like that. Let me see. I'm still shuffling. I feel this need. I need to continue shuffling. Linda, if you've already pulled the card, please go right ahead. I am still
And I
shuffling.
pulled a card that I almost never pull. And
Oh, I like this.
that is the Star.
One of my
So, which
favorite
is your
cards.
favorite card? I know one of your favorite cards.
Yes.
And it's interesting because both of these cards in the image on the Rider Waite, they are both 1 foot in the water, 1 foot on the ground, although Temperance is actually on the water, not so much in the water. And the Star is pouring water into the water and water on the ground, and the Temperance person, the angel in Temperance, is pouring from one cup to the other cup, but while they have a foot on the ground and a foot on the water. And so there's some similarities there. And I know the Star comes after the Tower, so it's sort of like a pause of all the stuff, the structures have crumbled, things have fallen apart, and now you are in starlight in the maybe the dead of night, and the starlight is shining, and you go down to the pool maybe to have a bath or have sit in the hot tub or whatever, and it's sort of this pause, this nice pause. And I really think it's almost like a reinforcement of sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. And I think sometimes you really have to get that message reinforced, because telling an American woman in this day and age not to do anything when there are situations going on in her life that she feels like need to be addressed is like a big deal, because they're like, what do you mean I should do nothing? Everything will fall apart if I do nothing. But yet, if you sit back and allow other people to act, or other things to come to fruition, the situations that you're worried about might just not magically, although it might seem like magic, they might just resolve, and you wouldn't really have to do anything if you just let yourself be. And so I almost think like that's a double whammy of a message there.
Wow. And you'll never guess the card that I pulled, but I just pulled the star card as well. And I
No
shuffled my
way.
deck for quite some time, yes. And as I put it down, I just quickly glanced and I'm like, oh my God, it's the star card. Um,
That's
yeah,
crazy.
so I think this is very relevant for me because the star card was very important for me in, in my own struggles with alcohol and my sobriety, and it it really did help me just know and see that there was guidance and support out there. So that the star card was more about support and knowing that if I think about balance and moderation, and it's just this idea that I never wanted to ask for help or never felt I could get help. And then knowing that, well, yeah, you can. There's a lot of help out there, and there's a lot of support for you, and you can go out and get it, and that support can help guide you in a direction that you want to go in, because sometimes we can be very out of balance with this idea that I can do everything all on my own. I don't need any help. I can do it. I got this. And granted, yes, there are many things that we can do on our own, and there are many things that we should do on our own, right? Because we need to be independent. We need to be able to figure things out on our own. But sometimes things are bigger than us, and we just need to put our ego aside, and say there's nothing wrong with asking for help, because help can give us a new perspective, and it can help us maybe change the direction or the path that we're taking, and if you think about it, spiritually or that path to the light, because if I look at myself in my time of drinking, that was a time of darkness, right? All of those thoughts and everything that was going on was this time of darkness, and the star for me represents the light. It represents seeing something and knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that I'm going to get to where I want to be. But in order for me to do that, I need support. I need to reach out to other people in order to get there. And that's just my story with sobriety, but that can pertain to anybody,
But
with anything that's going on in
that's
your
the
life,
integration where you are on that line of spiritual kind of, you stepped up from the physical, and you're kind of now in the spiritual, or going towards the spiritual. And so you talked about the ego now has to take a back seat, because you've
Yes.
integrated with something that's the higher power, the higher self, the thing that the part of you that looks to the best and most what I call it, the most benevolent outcome. And when you look at a most benevolent outcome and you look towards that, then you have to kind of take the ego out of that, because like, I don't know what the most benevolent outcome is. Maybe it's something that I would have no idea about, but my higher self does. My
Yes.
guides do. And so I have to let them drive for a while. And now my ego has to sit in the back seat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things that you hear, sometimes in the rooms, or when you are in recovery, is act as if, because sometimes, um, and I, after, being sober for I think it was almost 6 years now. Yay. I look at that idea of acting as if is following what, like you said, Linda, what my higher self knows to be true, but my ego is saying, no, 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 don't do that, honey. I'm here to protect you. Don't do that. You're not going to like it. And it's like listening to that and following what people are doing, because I chose to be there. So I chose to be there for a reason. And I look at that as my higher self is what was guiding me, but I just couldn't quite understand it. I just knew it was there,
Yeah.
and then as you proceed and you go forward and you're doing all of these things, now you start to see like, oh yeah, yeah, now I know why I wanted to do this. Now I know why that little voice inside of me said to go, and do this. And I think the star for me is just very representative of that, and I look at the star as something to keep in my mind as I move forward in life, as just the star is there to guide me to um to attaining or reaching that higher self of mine.
Yeah,
And part of
absolutely.
that is the support and the help and the knowing that I don't have to take this road all by myself. I don't have to walk this path by myself, but that the support is community is necessary. Community is necessary, so
That's
yeah.
beautiful,
Oh,
Kate. That's beautiful. I can't believe
thank you.
we pulled the same card, but it
I
happens. It
know.
happens so much, even when we're in the reading room in the symposium, which is where we get to practice with each other. So many times, either we pull the same cards, 2 or 3 people will pull the same card, or everybody will pull pentacles, or everybody will pull swords, or it's really interesting that way.
Yeah, very interesting when that happens.
So
So this was
this was
wonderful.
great.
Yeah,
This was
this
great.
really was. I really enjoyed this. So thank you to our listeners for joining us today. And I think to maybe get yourself started on working a little bit more with temperance, pull a card and just do what we did here. Because
Yeah.
I do, yeah. I mean, I think it can really open up a lot. And I think one of the things that we all practice here is sometimes you just pull one card, say to temperance, right? And as you start to explore how that card might relate to temperance, it starts to open up a lot of what's the word? A lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, a lot of areas maybe where you can then start pulling more cards to maybe get
Yeah.
further clarification on things that are going on. And that's a wonderful way to learn how to use tarot as well.
And for the people who like a good book, I mean, I did recommend The Tarot for Yourself by Mary K. Greer, still do. But if you want to go a little bit deeper, a little bit more structured on that, The 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack is excellent. So for those of you who
Yeah.
like a textbook kind of thing, yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you, listeners. And we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.